Hello, everybody. Welcome to BJ's Trailblazer Impact Research Webinar. Today's guest is Paolo Taticchi from Imperial College. He is the Principal Teaching Fellow in Management and Sustainability and Executive Director of Global Student Experience at the college. He teaches modules on sustainability and competitive advantage, strategy, global operations and projects, and the future of cities. Paolo formerly served as director of the school's top-ranked MSc Management and Global Online MBA. Paolo's research on performance measurement and management, business networks, and corporate sustainability is internationally recognized, where he has authored over 50 published academic journal articles. Aside from that, Paolo also has extensive consultancy experience in the fields of strategy, operations, and sustainability, and has worked in this capacity for firms of various sizes and in a range of different industries. So without much further ado, may I present Paolo, and Paolo, please take the stage.
Thank you very much, Victor, for the nice introduction. Good morning, everyone, for those of you based in London. Otherwise, good afternoon or good evening if you are elsewhere in the world. It is a great pleasure to be with you virtually for an hour to share some thoughts about sustainability and what this means in the context of business. What's the link with the topic of competitive advantage, and to also share some insights from research I recently published with some colleagues, and hopefully you had access to the white paper that was also suggested in support of this webinar. I'm going to speak for about an hour, more or less, and I will be happy to take a few questions at the end of my presentation. I will also share my contacts. You can easily find my email online. What you see on the cover slide is my Twitter account if you want to tweet about sustainability today. A bit of information about me and kind of what I do. So I'm a faculty, as Victor mentioned, at Imperial College Business School, and I joined Imperial about 6 years ago, and I believe at the time I was the only faculty with the word management and sustainability in the job title. Today we have more scholars working at Imperial in this field, which is of course not only growing in industry, but is increasingly interesting in terms of research and relevant for business education. Something I would say probably about me is that I'm not the classic academic. Of course, the university career has been the main part of my career, but during the PhD, I started a couple of firms, and therefore developed a bit of entrepreneurial experience, and I've done a lot of consulting as well. And today I sit in the advisory board of a number of organizations here in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in India, and in Italy as well. And very often I'm asked to help these organizations to basically develop sustainability strategies and to make sure that these strategies are actually integrated strategy. And you know, this integration with the business strategy is quite key, and is something I'm going to discuss later on in this webinar. I do a lot of teaching around the world. I believe I have taught full courses in 14 countries today, and that is kind of very interesting if you teach sustainability, because of course discussing sustainability in India is very different from discussing sustainability in the US or in Malaysia, for example. So something to keep in mind when you think of sustainability is that it's a topic that is very country specific and industry specific as well. My PhD was focused on not financial performance measurement. That's really how I ended up working on sustainability. Initially, my research focus was really on sustainability measurement and sustainability reporting, but in the last 5-6 years, I've been working a lot on implementing and developing sustainable business models, executing sustainable strategies at the supply chain level, and in fact, the research I'm going to present to you today, which focuses on corporate sustainability approaches and governance mechanisms in sustainable supply chain management, is kind of really focusing on execution and the merging of strategy with operations and supply chain management. So hopefully it's going to be interesting to you. Before discussing what sustainability in business means, I think it's kind of very important that we understand how we got here. This means how we got in the situation in the world that we needed to discuss sustainability, that we needed to plan for a better way to develop as a society. So kind of this question about where all of this is coming from, and what type of challenges we face today as a society is kind of very important, as it basically allows us to understand how these big challenges become also real problems for business today. I mean, the topic of sustainability and corporate sustainability is, of course, coming from the wider topic of a sustainable development. And probably many of you are familiar with the quite famous definition of United Nations, the Brundtland Commission in 1982, if I remember well. They basically said that a sustainable development is really about allowing the future generations to benefit of the same resources that our generation received. So it's basically this idea of kind of saving the resources of the planet, of maintaining and protecting the planet in a way that there is really a future. And it's kind of interesting that very often when we speak about sustainability, our mind goes directly to kind of environmental problems, for example. But the reality is that when we speak about a sustainable development, it's not only about environmental problems, but there is more than that. In fact, I'm going to show you now a slide that I typically use for the first lecture of my sustainability MBA class at Imperial. And I typically discuss this slide for 3 hours with my students, because basically this slide is made of a number of provoking pictures that kind of refer to different type of problems, different type of situations that can, overall could, fit in the categories of the economy and politics, the environment, society, and of course, there is also a role played by technology. So kind of, things like, for example, climate change or Brexit or war in Syria or factories collapsing in developing countries or agriculture affected by climate change, and this is basically causing, for example, changes in terms of output of agriculture, volatility of prices, and these type of problems that start as an environmental problem, then quickly become business problems for companies operating in that industry. Wastes, energy, companies showing illegal or unethical behaviors. All of these is kind of really part of the sustainable development discussion, and all of this is connected to the topic of sustainability in business. Now, today, of course, we don't have 3 hours for going over all of these situations one by one. But what I would like to do is actually to give you a taste of one of these problems, and why they are big problems for business. And I would like kind of quickly to touch on the issue, for example, of the working conditions in factories. And I don't know if you kind of recognize this picture. This is basically a picture showing suicide nets at Foxconn in China. Foxconn, for those of you who are not familiar with this company, is one of the largest manufacturers in the world of electronics. They are the main supplier of Apple computers, and they also work with other big brands of the industry, and their factories are just huge. I mean, if you start Googling for Foxconn, you will find that they own the largest factory site in the world. You are looking at an area that substantially looks like a city, and in fact, there isn't. We are not really aware of how many employees exactly work there, but estimates say that you are looking at something in between 230,000 and 450,000 people working there. Just to give you an idea, I'm originally from my hometown in Italy is Perugia, very relatively small city in Italy, and my city is 150,000 people. So you're looking at a factory, a number of factories that together, in one specific site combined employ over 300,000 people. It's just massive. And Foxconn became quite unfamous in 2010, and a big problem for Apple computers because a number of employees committed suicides. This wasn't the first time, but basically 2010 was really a peak year for them. And it was kind of really driven by, you know, the stress and the pressure of the working conditions. I mean, in 2010, you know, staff working on these assembly lines, in average, were working about 12 hours per day, 6 days a week. And you know, in 2010, you were probably looking at a salary of $150 per month in this type of industry. So this basically kind of, you know, suicides became, you know, a problem for the management of Foxconn. You know, became a big problem for Apple computers because many consumers and customers and stakeholders of different nature started questioning, you know, why Apple was kind of, you know, allowing these type of situations in their supply chain, and what was Apple doing to kind of, you know, address the problem or to prevent the problem. What I would like to say about this situation is that, you know, this kind of, you know, this situation of kind of, you know, extreme or particular working conditions is not something that, of course, you find just in the manufacturing of electronics. It is a big problem in other industries as well, and in other, you know, developing countries. And it is a very complex problem because, you know, you are looking at a situation where, you know, Foxconn is a huge company, but they have got like a very small margins on the products, because companies like Apple, you know, do their best to squeeze them. And, you know, Apple on the other side is, you know, one of the most profitable companies in the world, with, you know, profit in the range of billions. And you know, they do have, you know, of course, a say in these type of situations, and you know, they should probably approach the business in a different way. Then, you know, there are, of course, other stakeholders involved in this type of you know, problems. So you have, you know, the government that plays a role. You have customers. You have industry associations. So you know, sustainability in business means how can you, you know, address these type of problems, for example, of social nature, by rethinking business models in a way that you can create and establish win-win, you know, situations for different type of stakeholders. I mean, you are not going to be able to kind of, you know, address these type of problems in 3 months, in 6 months, in 1 year. I mean, Foxconn and the management of Foxconn, after these suicides, decided to install suicide nets in all the buildings of the factory. As you can understand, that's quite an extreme, you know, decision that maybe is going to help you a bit in the very short term, but is not going to help you to address the problem in the long term, and is not going to help you to kind of, you know, prevent this to happen again. They also kind of, you know, took other decisions. For example, they increased the wages twice in the following 6 months. But again, that wasn't probably enough to kind of, you know, address the problem at the bottom. So kind of, you know, to change business models, to change business, to change industries, it takes time, and sustainability is something that today is truly affecting management practice, because basically the idea of looking at these type of problems in industry and the idea to explore better ways of doing business means that substantially you rethink your business approach, your strategy, your operations. So you radically rethink management practice. So this kind of was very quickly to give an idea of what a problem, for example, associated to working conditions that could be classified as a problem of social nature, becomes a real problem for business. Similarly, you have climate change. Climate change is today impacting many countries around the world and is impacting companies with operations in these countries or interest in these countries. So all of these type of big challenges that we face as a society of economic, geopolitical, environmental or social nature today are at the base of the sustainability discussion and at the base of corporate sustainability. Imagine companies like, for example, Unilever. They have got business operations in probably 160 countries in the world. This means that they face different problems in the different countries, and that's why running a business today is so complex, because maybe in one country your challenge is working conditions, in another country there is a war, in another country there is Brexit, in another country there is climate change impacting your supply chain activities and all that. So today for multinational companies, addressing these type of problems is truly a big deal. And this is a new term that is quite popular these days. It emerged from research a number of years ago, and basically speaks about VUCA environments. This means the microenvironment of business is today extremely volatile, extremely uncertain, extremely complex, extremely ambiguous. This is the kind of a new normal for business, and this is why decision making is so challenging these days. This means you need, it's very hard to plan, it's very hard to look at the long term. You need to be extremely agile, extremely dynamic in order to address the challenges of the macro environment of business. And of course, at the policy level worldwide, the Sustainable Development Goals is the framework promoted by United Nations to address globally and in a collaborative way some of these major challenges that society is facing, and the Sustainable Development Goals are today also used by many corporations to basically report on sustainability and also to basically report on positive and negative impacts of business activities. So with this in mind, what type of challenges we face, I would like now to move quickly to the topic of modern corporate sustainability, and I would like to do that by explaining very clearly what difference there is between CSR, corporate social responsibility, and modern corporate sustainability. And I wanted to do this by explaining what really has changed in industry and in research in the last 50 years. So some of you may have seen this quote. It is very often used by sustainability speakers or sustainability professors in classes. That basically says that the only social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. And this was coming from Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize for the economics, and reflects an understanding of the role played by business in the 70s, which is quite different from what is the role or the expectation of the role played by business in society today. So in the 70s, there was this view that companies, if they were able to grow, this means they were able to employ more people, and this was very positive for society. So Friedman's view was issues like, for example, climate change should not really be part of the agenda of business, should be mainly addressed, for example, by government. So there was this view of business substantially disconnected from society. Things started changing a lot in the 90s, and I really like to recall here the big scandal that Nike faced in 1996 when this picture of a kid stitching soccer balls for Nike in Pakistan was published. It was made available to public by a magazine in the US, and this was showing this situation where first of all, it's hard to fully understand the picture and what's going on, because first of all, you don't know immediately if this is legal or illegal, because child labor is or work is allowed at different ages in different countries. Okay. So you don't immediately know about that. Second, when I, for example, showed this picture in developing countries, for example, in India, very often people, tell me, look, there is nothing wrong with this. Actually, this is a fantastic opportunity because most likely this kid is in a rural area, and with this activity, the family can have a meal that evening. So you you immediately understand that these type of situations are very challenging and tricky to analyze. This was the case that Nike had major suppliers in Southeast Asia, and these companies outsourced the work illegally, because that wasn't really allowed by the contract they had with Nike, to smaller organizations, up to the point that this black chain ended up giving work to kids in rural areas. So this is not something that Nike at the time designed, but it was a fact that in the supply chain of Nike, kids were stitching soccer balls. So this was a problem in the supply chain Nike, not even directly caused by Nike. This basically, situation when was made available to public ended up causing a lot of trouble to Nike, as you can imagine. And in fact, for the first time ever, entire movements against the brand of Nike started. This became really a major problem for the senior management of the company. This situation resulted in the value of shares of Nike collapsing for a relatively long period. What you really see is that you start from a problem in the supply chain, a sustainability problem of social nature, becoming a major issue for the brand of an organization, and the brand problem becoming a financial problem. It took some time to Nike to address the problem. They basically engaged at a certain point an external activist called Andrew Young, and he basically helped the company to address this issue of working conditions in supply chains. And Nike took this very, very seriously. And in fact, today is one of the most sustainable organizations in that industry. But it's kind of interesting to reflect on the fact that this sustainability journey really started with a major scandal in the 90s. And of course, other companies in the industry were kind of facing exactly the same problems at the time, but basically only Nike was under attack and kind of really risked to lose a lot of business because of this sustainability problem. So these kind of scandals that big companies faced in the 90s made very clear that being unsustainable in business wasn't an option. And this link between sustainability and brand and reputation became extremely clear. And this kind of led to basically a lot of greenwashing, and led the companies to kind of boost CSR in the 90s. So corporate social responsibility, wasn't a new topic at the time. This CSR as a practice and as a concept emerged in literature, probably in the 60s or 70s. But you are basically what you see in the 90s is that the number of companies engaging with CSR initiatives starts increasing very quickly. And this is really the result of the understanding of this link between sustainability problems and the possible issue and challenge of facing a scandal. So the idea of CSR at the time was quite basic. Was basically this idea to recognize that business activities create negative impacts on the environment or society, and therefore companies, in order to basically be good corporate citizens, should reinvest part of their profit or part of their revenue in initiatives that basically could lead to positive impact. So this is kind of is an interesting mechanism because first of all you start from the recognition that you have a problem, but instead of kind of really addressing the real problem, basically what you say is, okay, I'm gonna compensate my negative impacts by doing something good. This means you don't necessarily change your mindset, and that's probably particularly true if you are a very profitable business and therefore in the position to give out a very small percentage of revenue or profit to support positive initiatives. So that's basically why in the 90s many organizations claimed to engage with sustainability, but the reality is that these CSR initiatives were completely disconnected from the business model or the business strategy. So for example, a mining company in the US supporting nurseries in Kenya. I mean, there is no kind of business rationale for that. What's the link with the business strategy? It's just pure CSR, very traditional CSR initiatives, good initiatives that you put in place to basically kind of clean the brand and make sure that you are perceived by key stakeholders as a sustainable organization. So one of my favorite cases is something that happened in China. I don't remember exactly. I think it was 2012 when basically the river of this city in China suddenly turned red one day. And the reason for that was that there was a very big chemical district in the city. This is an industrial city, and a company had a major leak of chemicals that basically ended up in the river and completely destroyed the biodiversity of the river truly forever. And if you look at the type of sustainability programs that corporations in the region were offering at the time, they were for example supporting the planting of trees and showing many pictures of this kind in their social media, not, for example, really investing on maintenance or safety of their operations to prevent this type of disasters. So I think that companies didn't understand CSR in the 90s, and basically just kind of saw a marketing opportunity, or basically interpreted sustainability as something brand related, and of course that's very far from what real sustainability is, and hopefully what we are discussing today. So in the 90s, another concept that emerged and is still widely used is this concept of the triple bottom line of a business. This means a company should not only take into account, the economy. This means growth. This means revenue. This means profit. But should also take into account the environment and society. And this kind of concept of the triple bottom line is, of course, very different from the view of, for example, Milton Friedman in the 70s. The definition that you see on the screen is one of the many definitions of corporate sustainability. Today, this is a kind of is a definition I particularly like, because I think is touching on many good points. Is basically saying that corporate sustainability is a business approach. So it's not about saving the planet. It's not about saving communities. Corporate sustainability is about business and the way of doing business that basically creates a long-term shareholder value by embracing opportunities and managing risks deriving from the triple bottom line. To further, improve this definition, I would probably suggest that to change the word shareholder with stakeholder value. I think, at that point, this definition would be close to perfection. But this is kind of is the new way of thinking when it comes to sustainability in industry. And today, in these two dimensions of exploring opportunities and managing business risks are extremely important. Another concept that is largely in use in industry today is the concept of shared value that was really kind of created by a very popular academic and popular strategist, Michael Porter, at Harvard Business School. And basically, the concept of a shared value is really suggesting to rethink, business models and, economy at large by taking into account, value creation for all the stakeholders. And also this idea that sustainability is real and is smart only if it is truly integrated with the business strategy of an organization. So this is a concept of aligning sustainability with business strategy is kind of really key to understand, sustainability in business and what companies should be doing today. Kind of to end a bit this overview of corporate sustainability. I believe 2018 was very important here because there was this message that came from Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, that really made news around the world. BlackRock, as you probably know, is the largest asset management organization in the world. This means that they have got investments in all the big corporations of the world. And the CEO of BlackRock in January 2018 sent this letter to basically global CEOs saying that sustainability is not anymore about marketing. Sustainability is real, and if companies don't take it seriously, most likely they are gonna face big challenges with their business. And it was very explicit in saying, as a company, in the future we will only invest in companies, in corporations that we think are taking sustainability seriously, and we will also use and leverage our presence in the boards of these companies to basically push their sustainability agendas. This was a very important message, because if Wall Street understands sustainability, if investors understand sustainability, this means that one of the major stakeholders of business today is kind of pushing organizations to do better. So today, sustainability in industry is something that is, very often driven by different stakeholders. In some industries, you have investors pushing for sustainability. In some industries, you have consumers, customers pushing for sustainability. In some industries, you have a government pushing for sustainability. In some, industries, you see visionary entrepreneurs and senior management pushing for that. So there is a kind of momentum on this topic, and I believe sustainability today is something that is really changing extremely quickly management practice. At this stage, I would like to kind of share some research that together with a colleague from Audencia Business School in France, we carried out a few years ago and published in 2016. This article that you can access on the Journal of Cleaner Production was basically aiming to substantially achieve two things. The first objective of this research was to try to develop a framework to basically audit sustainability in companies, and to basically be able to recognize who is leading in industry when it comes to sustainability, and which organizations have got more traditional approaches to sustainability. So how do you recognize the leader? That was one key research question that led us to this investigation, and the second one was kind of aiming to understand when companies have a certain sustainability strategy, what type of governance mechanisms they activate, they use, they implement in order to align their supply chains. Because very often sustainability problems are not at the corporate level, but they are at the supply chain level. So if a corporation wants to become more sustainable, it means they need to work with suppliers to rethink supply chain activities. If you look at relevant literature, what you see is that governance mechanisms can be kind of classified in many ways, but substantially there are two classifications that are quite popular, and they basically kind of speak about level of collaboration and level of formalization. To kind of to explain this with an example, I would like to go back to the case of Foxconn and Apple that we discussed at the beginning of this webinar. And in that specific context, where Foxconn was, for example, facing sustainability problems, and Apple as a client was, involved in this. At that point, you could have, you could kind of expect a different type of reactions from Apple. So Apple could, for example, develop a collaborative behavior, a collaborative approach with Foxconn, saying, look, we need to address this issue. I'm going to work with you in the next 2 years to help you to improve working conditions in your factory. We will discuss maybe revenue. We will discuss, profit, and we will try to rethink the contracts we have in place with you. We will, provide, for example, experts to help you to address these problems. So, that type of approach is quite, for example, collaborative. On the other side, you could have, clients like Apple simply saying, look, we have, contracts in place. I cannot accept these type of situations. If you're not able to, improve the situation within 3 months, we are out of business. So that is a kind of an example of a different reaction or a different approach to the situation, which is not non-collaborative. At times, companies develop initiatives and, for example, collaboration in a very formal way. For example, they create programs, they introduce processes to address specific sustainability issues, or at times the type of actions they take are, extremely informal. And again, these kind of principles that are, typically used to design and study and analyze the governance mechanisms in supply chain management are very important to understand the sustainable supply chain management research as well. And basically, we believe that it is very important to have a good mix, a good balance of these type of mechanisms when you try to execute your sustainability strategies at the supply chain level. In this basically specific research, we decided to study these research questions by investigating a number of companies based in industry, based in Italy, and we selected companies in different industries, as you can see from the table, companies with different governance. So some of these companies were, for example, family businesses and limited companies, while other companies were, for example, private limited organizations. We had a mix of B2B and B2C firms, and also in terms of the supply chain activities, some of these companies had supply chains in Italy, while other companies had very international supply chains. So we spent time studying, these companies and their practices, and by doing this, we were able to basically develop 8 case studies that allowed us to basically develop theory from practice. And at the end, we were able to produce a framework that was published in this research, in this paper, that is really useful if you want to, for example, design sustainability initiatives, but is also very useful to audit companies, to assess the sustainability in the industry, because it can help you to basically identify who is truly a leader and who is not a leader. And of course, in industry, you don't expect everyone to be a leader, but it's kind of very interesting to see if what companies claim is actually responding to reality. So in this framework, we kind of propose 3 categories: sustainability leaders, sustainability practitioners, and traditionalists. And what we argue is that if a company is truly a leader, they should have a triple bottom line approach to business. This means that their strategies and their governance mechanisms reflect several initiatives focused on economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability at the same time in a very balanced and integrated way. And they don't limit to the corporate, but they also extend to the supply chain level. This means they have a strong sustainable supply chain management practice in place. So this idea that a triple bottom line approach combined with sustainable supply chain management allows the companies to really execute well sustainability strategies, and therefore they could end up in leading positions in industry because of that. At times you see organizations that, for example, focus a lot their sustainability strategies on the environment and not necessarily on communities or economic aspects, and at times they may have, for example, initiatives in place with suppliers, but not fully structured programs. So following these criteria of triple bottom line and sustainable supply chain management principles, we kind of classify these type of companies as sustainability practitioners. And then there is, of course, a third category. The third category is made of companies that do something about sustainability. It could be initiatives at the corporate level or initiatives at the supply chain level, but they substantially lack a strategy, they substantially lack an agenda. And we basically classify these type of companies as traditionalists. This means that they have a bit of they have some kind of engagement, but is not strong enough for them to be identified as practitioners. This means truly engaged, at least with some dimensions of sustainability, and definitely very different from what the leaders in industry do. If you read the paper, what you will see is that for each case study, for each company, we mapped all governance mechanisms that the firm was using to transform the corporation, to transform the supply chain, and we basically classified these governance mechanisms based on triple bottom line dimensions and formal, informal, collaborative, non-collaborative approaches. So this kind of framework and this tool can be used to really audit what companies are doing and to develop an in-depth understanding of how solid the strategy is at the corporate level, how solid the strategy is for sustainable supply chain management, and where they stand versus competitors, because of course you can duplicate the exercise for competitors. I would like to end with very quickly some again stories from research, from my advisory work from Italy. Italy is a country that very often you associate to tourism, but Italy is still one of the manufacturing superpowers of the world, and there are very innovative companies in Italy that are also leading from a sustainability perspective. And I just kind of wanted to mention to you 3 stories. I don't have time to explain them in detail, but you can do a bit of research on your own, and I can guarantee these are going to be very interesting stories for you. The first one I would like to share, and we kind of really go back in time, is the one of a visionary entrepreneur, Adriano Olivetti, in the north of Italy. And he basically established Olivetti, the PC maker company in the north of Italy after the Second World War, and became a very big industry. And since the beginning, he was recognized as an entrepreneur, taking care of his employees, investing and reinvesting a lot on the local communities, and basically developing a business model for Olivetti that was quite different from the traditional capitalistic approaches of other companies in Italy at the time. What is interesting is that Adriano Olivetti was kind of spending a lot on sustainability at the time, really focusing on employees and the local communities, so focusing on the social dimension. So because of that, using probably my framework, Olivetti, would have been classified as a practitioner, as a sustainability practitioner. But what is really interesting about this story and his story is that at a certain point, the company faced a lot of financial challenges. And despite of that, basically Olivetti never stopped spending on sustainability, never cut down sustainability initiatives or CSR projects. And this is basically, I think, is an important story, because sustainability is not something that you do only when the business is doing well. I mean, sustainability should really be at the core of the values of a business. It should be really at the core of the business model, and therefore, if sustainability is truly integrated into business strategy, and Olivetti is a very good example of that, you never stop investing on sustainability. Otherwise, it would be a major mistake. Another interesting story, I think, from Italy. I think this is today one of the most interesting companies to study from a sustainability perspective, is Brunello Cucinelli. Brunello Cucinelli is in the luxury fashion industry. They basically produce and sell around the world premium cashmere, and Brunello Cucinelli, if you start kind of doing a bit of research, you can find a lot of videos on YouTube and readings of all kind. Has basically built the entire company, again focusing on employees, focusing on the local community. And this sustainability aspect of the business model basically allowed Brunello Cucinelli to develop a company with a very strong brand in the context of an industry that is often attacked because of unsustainable practices. So again, you kind of know you really recognize in this story a great example of sustainability integrated into business strategy, sustainability that becomes an element of competitive advantage, and sustainability that empowers the brand of an organization, and this basically leads to superior financial performance. They have introduced some really interesting practices in the business. I'm just gonna mention one to kind of stimulate your interest to study this company, and I just wanted to mention their policy on working hours and emails. Basically, staff work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But after that, basically lights in the offices are turned off, and only senior executives are allowed to exchange emails after 5 p.m., not normal staff. And the rationale for that is that Brunello Cucinelli says when you are at work, you should be not productive. You should be super productive. You should really give your best. But as soon as you leave the company, you have a life, and it's important that us as a business, we don't interfere with your personal life. It's important that you have time to enjoy family and friends. It's important that you have time to rest. Therefore, he kind of he implemented this policy in the business where work is an important moment of life, but is not kind of impacting your personal life, because you are always connected, always controlling email on your phone. I wished I had that at Imperial. So I think this is a very interesting story of a very sustainable corporation. Another interesting case, I had the opportunity to meet one of these two young entrepreneurs in London a couple of months ago, in occasion of an award ceremony, and they were receiving an award, by the way. And these basically two young entrepreneurs are from Sicily, and as you know, Sicily is famous for many things, including oranges and lemons. And they basically had an idea to basically reuse the skin of oranges and lemons to basically produce fabrics to be used in the fashion industry. And basically, but by doing this, they kind of they did research, of course, to kind of to develop the right industrial processes to do that, but this idea to transform a waste into something valuable is of course very sustainable, and really aligned with this concept of a circular economy that we try to to push around the world. And they started a business. The business is flying. They became suppliers of some very big brands in the fashion industry. And again, this is a great example of, in this case, an opportunity that they were, able to explore and catch by looking at, products and processes from a sustainability perspective. So today, you kind of you see many startups that emerge with products and services where sustainability is truly at the core. And again, I think this is helping to build momentum on this topic. I would like to end with a final reflection, this is the cover of Forbes in 2007, and you can read the title. Is speaking about Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? And you probably can make a guess of what is the market share of Nokia today. Very, very small, substantially not existing anymore. They kind of rebranded into something else. But this is basically to say that a company that was in a very leading position only 12 years ago was a substantially a monopoly market that was substantially controlling the dynamics of the market. Today is substantially not in business anymore. So this is how challenging is being in business today. And drivers of competitive advantage change extremely quickly, and you need to kind of if you're in business today, you need to understand that you need to evolve your business models very quickly. Sustainability is not the fashion of the moment anymore. Sustainability is real. Sustainability is changing the way we develop policies around the world. Sustainability is impacting the way we do business around the world. Sustainability is radically changing, decision-making processes in organizations, and therefore the role of management and management practice in general. So today, it's extremely important that organizations engage with sustainability. It's very important that they develop strategies for sustainability. It's very important that they rethink their value creation processes, because otherwise they can really risk to basically face a very hard time in the years coming. So I hope this was a quick but interesting and also hopefully inspiring and informative overview of corporate sustainability. And at this point, I already made use of an hour of your time. So I'm happy to take a couple of questions if there are any. Maybe Victor, you can moderate the questions, and very happy to answer a few in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, fantastic, Paolo. Well, there's one question on sustainability for big corporates. Some seem to talk a lot about sustainability, but don't take the subject seriously when it comes to hard numbers. How do you address corporates that use it mainly as perhaps a marketing stunt and don't take it as seriously as perhaps they should?
That's a very good. That's a very good question. As I said before, in the 90s and probably in the early 2000s as well, we have faced many we have seen many scandals in industry, and this means that the companies were not taking this seriously. Still today, if you look at surveys carried out by big consulting firms, you basically see that very often the main reason for engagement with sustainability is to protect the brand, to improve reputation. And then there is this idea of exploring business opportunities or, for example, managing business risks. So the brand dimension of sustainability is still very, very important. But I believe that in the last 5 years, there is a greater understanding that sustainability is not only about branding. There is more than that. There are opportunities to be explored. There are benefits about being truly sustainable. So there is a kind of a lot of research these days that is looking at the link between sustainability performance and financial performance. And today you have a lot of research showing that this link, this correlation is actually positive. This means companies that truly engage with sustainability, truly improve their operations, their value chain activities, they also perform better financially. This means that they are basically able to improve the business. And the sustainability is not a cost anymore at that point. The sustainability becomes a driver, an element of competitive advantage, leading to profit and leading to risk, to basically a better way of managing business risks. So I think this is very different today from 5-10 years ago. I believe that today there is more knowledge. I believe today there is more pressure coming from stakeholders of different kinds. So I believe today we see a more genuine engagement with sustainability in industry in general. And I believe that this is going to be the case in the years coming.
Fantastic. And I think we only have time for one more question. And in this one, it says, where would we be able to find for businesses or corporates a bank of various metrics where you could try out how the impact that an organization has on sustainability?
So if I understand the question well, is where do you can find information? Where do you can find data? Is that the question?
Yeah, where you can find basically information on how to create impact metrics or sorts for sustainability measures.
Okay. So there are three I think three things to say to answer in full this question. The first one is that with with the increasing interest for the topic of sustainability in research, we have basically seen ESG data growing, and by ESG data I mean environmental, social, and governance data. Today, the largest provider of ESG data is Bloomberg. This means, if you have a Bloomberg terminal, you can download thousands and thousands of ESG data relating to different companies around the world of different size and different industries. Together with ESG data and various ESG providers, ESG data providers, you have a number of companies that produce rankings and indexes. So, for example, Dow Jones has got a sustainability index, or Standard & Poor's, they've got a sustainability index. So they have developed their own methodologies to audit companies using the ESG criteria, and they basically produce worldwide and country and industry specific rankings based on sustainability. Concerning impact, measuring impact is very tricky. but of course very interesting. It is very tricky because very often the impact of business activities is not necessary in the short term, is in the long term. So there are kind of there are ways to do that. I believe you can find in literature a number of frameworks that have been kind of proposed to measure impact, kind of social impact, for example, of organizations. Industry has been active on this front as well. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago that, for example, KPMG published a framework for measuring societal impact. So there are a number of tools out there. I'm not sure how validated or tested they are, but I believe there are frameworks that companies and professionals and scholars can try to use and test and adapt to their needs. I think this kind of research field is growing very quickly. So we are going to see more and more research and tools aiming at measuring sustainability, aiming at facilitating reporting on sustainability, aiming at measuring impact. Of course, the topic of impact is a key, because sustainability is a long-term game. So we need to be able to measure impact. I don't believe today there is a best practice to do that, but there are some interesting frameworks that can be used to pilot initiatives. There is another initiative and framework I wanted to mention to bring my answer to an end, and is a methodology currently under development at NYU in New York, and is a methodology called the ROSI, which stands for Return on Sustainability Investments, and basically is a methodology that colleagues at NYU are developing to basically quantify the financial benefit of sustainability initiatives. And I think that is extremely important, because if you can quantify the financial benefit of sustainability initiatives, this means that it's much easier for managers to develop the business case for sustainability in organizations, and this means that it's much easier to measure performance, sustainability performance as well. So I think there is a lot going on. This is a very interesting research field these days.
Thank you so very much, Paolo. I think it's been a great webinar, great presentation on your end. So thank you once again. Everybody, thank you for sticking along as well and taking part in the webinar. It will be uploaded, of course, on the BGA Impact Trailblazer series. So if you ever want to catch up with this piece of research again, or actually download any of the research that Paolo has actually published, you can do so directly on the platform. Thank you so much, everybody, and hope to see you again for the next webinar.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, BGA, for the opportunity. Have a good day, everyone.